Okay, so in this video I just wanted to run through the kidneys and the role that the kidneys have in excretion and in osmoregulation. So the main excretory organs are the lungs, the skin and the kidneys. Okay, the urinary system consists of 2 kidneys. Now, where in your body are the kidneys, if they asked you that? Well, they're towards the back of the abdomen. So remember, the diaphragm separates the thorax, where your heart and your lungs are, and the below the diaphragm then is the abdomen. So the kidneys are to the back of your abdomen, and remember, you see there, look, that you've got the aorta. So the aorta is the main artery of the body, and it's bringing oxygenated, rich blood down into the kidney, away from the heart towards the kidney. Now the aorta branches to a renal artery. Okay, so you have one renal artery going in towards your kidney, and then that renal artery subdivides again to form renal arterioles. Okay, so they're carrying oxygen into the kidney, but it's also carrying high degree of waste like urea that needs to be removed. Okay, so the functions of the kidneys are excretion of water, salts and urea, and a mixture of water, salts and urea urine. So production of urine is one function of the kidney. And then osmoregulation, to control the water-salt balance of your blood and to control the pH of your blood, okay? Now, again, look, that's junior cert. You're all okay with labelling that, I'm sure. Now, there are 3 processes involved in making urine, okay? You have filtration, reabsorption and secretion. Now, you need to know where these 3 stages occur, okay? And what's involved. All right, so blood enters the kidneys through the renal arteries. The kidneys filter the waste, so they remove urea, okay, and salts, and but they also filter useful substances from the blood. So those useful substances need to be reabsorbed back into your bloodstream. You don't want to be excreting something like glucose. Okay, you want to reabsorb glucose back into your blood. So you should not have glucose in your urine. Glucose should be reabsorbed back into your bloodstream. Keep it in your body. Some materials are secreted from the blood, so don't mix up the direction. Now, we did loads of revision sheets on the nephron and revision on excretion and that. So look them up, get them out, put them all together and watch the direction in which substances are moving. So reabsorption, it's going from the filtrate back into your blood, and you're trying to keep those useful substances like glucose. With secretion, you're trying to get rid of ions, particularly potassium ions and hydrogen ions. And if you're trying to get rid of them, then they're going from the blood into the filtrate, and you get rid of it through your urethra when you excrete urine. Urine is formed in the kidneys and it flows and stored in your bladder, and then you excrete it through the urethra. Okay, you have one urethra, and then blood leaves the kidneys in the renal veins. Okay, now the bladder stores urine. Urine is excreted through the urethra. The nephrons is the functional unit of a kidney. So you have millions of nephrons in each kidney. They carry out the functions of the kidney. They're located in the cortex and the medulla of your kidney. So do you remember CMP? Cortex, medulla, and pelvis. Okay, so CMP, and you need to know that filtration occurs in the cortex, reabsorption happens in the cortex and the medulla, and secretion happens in just the cortex, okay? Now, can you see there, look, where you have the one nephron shown there? So you can see that the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus is in the cortex. That's why you have filtration in the cortex. Okay, you have reabsorption in the cortex, where you have your proximal and distal convoluted tubules, but the loop of Henle goes down into the medulla, and you also have reabsorption occurring from the loop of Henle, so you must include medulla when you're asked for location of reabsorption. And then secretion happens generally in the distal convoluted tubules, which say secretion is the cortex. Okay. Oh, now you need to be able to label the nephron. Now, that just requires a bit of revision, so go over it yourselves. So you can see the renal arteriole is supplying blood to the nephron. It branches up into the afferent arteriole. See the way the afferent arteriole is wider than the effluent arteriole? Now, this is arterial blood. So this blood is being pumped from the heart. So there's high blood pressure here, okay? And because the efferent arteriole is narrower than the afferent arteriole, that also creates high blood pressure. So the blood in the glomerulus is under very high pressure, higher than normal blood pressure, okay? And it has to subdivide into tiny little capillaries that are the wall of which is very, very thin and porous and allows the substances to pass through from the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule. So you have filtration happening in the glomerulus, filtration, cortex. So lots of substances are going to pass out into the Bowman's capsule. Remember we said it was like a C-shaped cap or cup that surrounds the glomerulus. The glomerulus is just a bunch of blood capillaries, okay? Then you have your proximal convoluted tubule. Convoluted means lots of folding. The loop of Henle, ascending loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, collecting duct, and then do you see the way the effluent arteriole branches, those capillaries there completely surround the nephron, and then they rejoin to form the renal venule, which rejoins to form the renal vein, which brings blood away from the kidney. Okay, so that blood then of course would have no waste, no urea, and very little oxygen as well as deoxygenated. Okay, that's another diagram of the nephron there. So just to recap again now on filtration, blood enters each kidney through the renal artery. The renal artery divides up into the renal arteriole, and these again split into the afferent arteriole. So the diameter is getting much, much, much smaller. The afferent arteriole divides even further then into capillaries. So again, remember you're trying to squeeze liquid through narrow and narrow and narrow tubes, then you're going to increase the pressure. And remember that this is already arterial blood. So this is already under high pressure. This then is found in the Bowman's capsule. Blood leaves the glomerulus in the efferent arteriole. These divide to form capillaries that surround the nephron. So remember, the nephron has a really rich blood supply. So all those capillaries completely surround the nephron. The capillaries will eventually rejoin to form the renal venule, combine to form the renal vein. Okay, so filtration occurring in the glomerulus. Blood entering the nephron, afferent arteriole contains waste. Now all of this is filtered through good stuff as well that we need to keep: glucose, amino acids, vitamins. Look, we do not want them ending up in our urine. And these all go through into the Bowman's capsule, and all of that liquid is called the glomerular filtrate. Okay, you can see that there. Now, if they ask you anything about adaptations of the glomerulus for its function and filtration, you're going to say that the blood pressure is extremely high, and talk about the way that the vessels are getting narrower and narrower. And remember that the blood is already arterial blood, so it's already under high pressure. Surface area of the glomerulus is large, because of the way it all subdivides, the capillaries all subdivide. The walls are very, very porous, which means lots of substances can pass through easily enough, and thin walls. Remember, for adaptations, we had TLC, okay? So thin walls, 1 cell thick, large surface area, and capillaries or good blood supply. Larger substances, though, can't fit through the walls of the glomerulus and into the Bowman's capsule. So things like, have an example of a few things: red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, that sort of thing. Now, where does filtration occur? The cortex, because that's where you have the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. Reabsorption then of the useful substances occurs in the proximal convoluted tubule and the loop of Henle and the distal convoluted tubule. So you're going to say cortex and medulla, okay? So in the rest of the nephron now, water, most of the salts and other useful substances are reabsorbed back, okay? Proximal convoluted tube, water. Remember, anytime you talk about water being reabsorbed from the filtrate back into your blood, because you want to keep it, then it's by osmosis. Movement of water, osmosis. The glucose, the amino acids, they move either by active transport or diffusion. Okay, now the proximal convoluted tubule is adapted for its function of reabsorption because it's thin walls, okay, 1 cell thick, large surface area, lots of villi and microvilli, and lots of mitochondria because it needs to produce energy for the reabsorption of salts by active transport. Because remember, active transport is going against a concentration gradient, so you're going from low to high, so that will require energy. Okay, now the loop of Henle is the descending loop, is permeable to water, so water is reabsorbed back into your bloodstream. Remember, the capillaries are covering the loop of Henle, okay, so the water goes back into the blood, and some minerals are also absorbed here. The ascending loop of Henle, those permeable to salts, and they are reabsorbed by a mixture of diffusion and active transport, okay? So you want to keep water back in your bloodstream and some salts. Distal convoluted tubule is responsible also for the precise control of water salt pH. The collecting duct then is permeable to water, and urine leads through the collecting duct, okay? Now, secretion now is the third process that occurs in urine production, and this is going the opposite way now. Secretion is where you have potassium and hydrogen ions passing from the blood into the nephron. So we want to get rid of these things. We don't want to keep them in our bloodstream. We want to get rid of potassium ions and hydrogen ions. Too much potassium prevents your nerve impulses travelling properly and can also reduce the strength of muscle contraction. And too many hydrogen ions will make your blood very acidic. So remember, the hydrogen ion concentration controls pH. So the more hydrogen ions you have, the more acidic your blood is, the lower the pH. So the job of the collecting duct and the distal convoluted tubule is to secrete these substances into the nephron, into the collecting duct, and then we'll get rid of them in our urine. Okay. Now, so if they ask you where does secretion happen, you're going to say cortex, because that's where you have the distal, the distal convoluted tubule. Okay. Now the last thing, and this comes up an awful lot actually, is the role of antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, in controlling our volume of urine, the amount of urine that we produce, and the concentration of urea in that urine. Now, if you drink very little water and you're exercising, so you're losing water as sweat, then what's going to happen is that the concentration of water in your blood will fall. Okay? Receptors in the brain are triggered. They send a message to your pituitary gland to release antidiuretic hormone. Now, let's be careful with that. Antidiuretic hormone is actually made in your hypothalamus, but it's stored in the pituitary. So it's made in the hypothalamus, stored in the pituitary. So it's released from the pituitary. Now, in school, I would have said to you that diuretic substances make you want to go to the toilet because you produce large volumes of urine, okay? Coffee, for instance. If you drink lots of coffee, you'll want to go to the toilet a lot, okay? Antidiuretic, then, on the other hand, stops that needing to go to the toilet. So, like, if your body releases antidiuretic hormone, that travels in your bloodstream, as all hormones travel in your bloodstream, down to the target organ, which is your distal convoluted tubule and your collecting duct. And there you make the walls to be more permeable to water. If they're more permeable to water, then more water is reabsorbed back into your bloodstream from the nephron. So that will result in less urine, okay, but more concentrated with urea. So it'll be very dark in colour, quite smelly, but not much of it. So antidiuretic means you do not need to go to the toilet because you're not producing the volume of urine that you would otherwise. Okay, so just to recap on that, and we have a very good revision sheet on this now, so look that up as well. So if your blood water content reduced, so if there isn't enough water in your blood, in other words, okay, then the pituitary gland releases antidiuretic hormone. That hormone travels in your bloodstream to the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct, causing them to be more permeable to water. More water is reabsorbed back into your bloodstream, so you have less urine being produced, okay? On the other hand then, if you drink lots of water, okay, less ADH is released by the pituitary. The walls of the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct are more impermeable to water, which means less water can be reabsorbed back into your blood. So you have more water in your collecting duct, if you like. So you'll have a larger volume of urine produced, and that will dilute the urea